All right, good morning and welcome to the show. This is the Weekly Jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And today, Rohi, we have a special podcast. I think we missed last week, but we wanted to bring it back today. We're going to talk about the primary elections, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so we just finished the primary elections for California, and a lot of the results still showing some of the long-time political divides, but also the numbers. I mean, the weak voter turnout is showing that I think people are, in talking to people are just they're frustrated, or they don't know what to vote, or they're confused, or I don't know what ad to believe. It's definitely interesting to see how the results are playing out right now. So.
And when we talk about primaries, Rohi, it seems like, especially around these rural areas in the Central Valley, and it may be the same in all of statewide, but it seems like 30% or less than 30% of the voters come out to vote in these primaries.
Yeah.
And I've seen some candidates that know that they take theirs to the general election, that they don't put a lot of emphasis and or money if it's only two candidates, because they know they're going to have a runoff anyway. Mm-hmm. So they'd rather conserve that money and spend it out. But here locally, it's a different story. Sometimes here, when you have these primaries, especially with supervisors, I think those are important, because if there's only two, then whoever has the most voters typically wins that election. And you can probably showcase something there if you have the voters. Let's go ahead and go with the...
So I mean, that was one of the things to wake up this morning to, was kind of the voter turnout, at least so far. I mean, obviously there's still mail-ins that will show up, but 23% voters so far, that's kind of poor. I mean,
and this is Madera County?
Madera County,
yeah. I mean, interesting. So, I can see the chart there.
And I think it's almost sad, because again, we just came out of Memorial Day, and we're about to hit, July 4th. So here's like some of the two big, like, patriotic days and reminds us of, like, what does it mean to be an American? And then here comes the primary right in the middle, and it's like nobody votes, which is, to me, a core fundamental American thing. Like, and not just an American, just like it's a patriotic. Every country votes, But I feel like here in America, like, it's just getting less and less of people caring about voting or trusting the system, or whatever.
Do you think it's fatigue? Maybe people are just tired of seeing these two parties go back and forth. I mean, at this time, and I put a sign up there. I put a picture up there just to kind of show that some people sometimes are requesting certain things, whether it's equality, inclusion. I mean, you can add all these terms out there. Less government, less taxes. I mean, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And when you're picketing for something, it's because you're saying, hey, you're not listening to me.
Yeah.
And you seem to see a lot of this, not necessarily in Madera, but you seem to see it across the nation, and more so in California. But if you noted, the concentration of the majority of the population is around the Central Coast, mm-hmm. and then again the North and South, whereas the rural areas such as the Central Valley, you have maybe between 8 counties, maybe less than 5 million.
Yeah.
But yet these other areas that are very urban control most of the population and probably have more of the representatives that typically make more decisions.
Yeah.
But kind of highlight on that. Highlight on the turnout there. I mean, you mentioned 24%.
Yeah, 23% as of right now, in which it'll update as, again, some of the mail-in votes get received. But I think especially when you're looking at the party systems, I mean, just obviously I've known for a long time, and you probably have as well, that Madera County as a whole is generally very Republican. It's very strong. Which when you look at the first one, Tom McClintock getting 64% of the votes, you can see that it's red. Hey, Madera's red. But then you go to the next one right after that, and here's Adam Gray, Democrat, and he's edging out. So it's like you had to have traitors, You had the guy that went, I'm Republican, but I voted different, And I'm kind of glad there's maybe some of that anonymous. I mean, I can't imagine voting if there was a way to go and look up what everybody voted. I mean, I feel like that would be kind of interesting. But I mean, just right there shows you that, hey, Madera wasn't fully read on all the people.
Yes, yes. And I mean, and should you blame? I mean, here's the thing that I think I have a problem with is...
yes, you blame them.
Well, I mean, are you supposed to be loyal?
Yeah.
to the party system. And you brought up Adam Gray, right?
Yeah.
Adam Gray shows a lot. He's like a moderate, right? Shows a lot of conservative views, to some extent, right? Not all the time, but obviously supports water reform, agriculture, and what have you. So that resonates with some of the conservatives here in our county, right? And I think that may resonate with some of the voters and say, well, hey, I'm willing to cross party line to go and vote for this guy that still has some of the values that I do, whether it's ag, water, what have
Sure.
you, and I think vice versa, I mean, Rohi, I mean, in our case, we're not really, we're nonpartisan, right?
Sure.
But nevertheless, in the bigger picture, the grander scheme of state and or national, we tend to choose to go a certain route, right? Whether you choose to be Democrat, Republican, I choose to be either. To me, it's, do I have a personal connection with that person? Does that person mean well for the voting people, right? For the voting class, and some of those values do align, and this is where I think for me, I'm not necessarily loyal to any particular party line. I may be registered as a Democrat, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I always vote Democrat. I've supported many Republicans, including, I would say, some of the local officials here.
Yeah.
Right? And to me, it's more like, well, I know the person. I know his family. I
Yeah.
know that he means well for his community. Problem is that that phases out when you're no longer connected to that person outside of the city or outside of the county, right? You start looking the state and you start looking at national news, and you don't know if that person really aligns with you or not. But nevertheless, they happen to fall in that party line, and typically that's how people vote. It's unfortunate, but that's typically the way it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to show like this one here, so I mean, here's again, because you're talking about the two-party system. I mean, obviously with Madera, both candidates, Republican, around 60%. You got 17,000 votes, which is interesting because one thing it's 1770-74, and the other one 17,648. So some people didn't even want to make a choice on the second one potentially. But to your point, Democrat, Republican get the strongest votes, and then the third doesn't get anything. The Green Party, they only got 4% collectively. So it's to your point, is it really only still a two-party system? Or are you shooting yourself in the foot by saying, I don't really fully identify with one or the other, I'm going to make my own or go my own way? Is it really just kind of like leaving people out there going like, I know the guy, but I don't, what does green mean?
Yeah.
What does this
Yeah.
other party mean? What do they really stand for? Are they too far out there that I don't really want to align with them,
And I think it has to do with the controls of media, right? Like who funnels money to these parties where, the majority of advertisements, social media, it's not, I really haven't seen anything come across social media and or the main streams of media that represent anything but these two parties, right? And then you have news outlets, right? A lot of the news outlets like CNN may be liberal Democratic, Fox may be associated with conservative Republicans. And I don't know any other media out there, right? I don't know where CBS lies, NBC, but one can say, well, they may be moderate or they may be left-leaning, right-leaning, whatever the case may be, but I don't really hear anything outside of those two parties. And hence, it demonstrates it when you look at the polls, because who are these people, right? There's not enough money out there to show who these people are, to provide examples of what they're doing. But I can tell you that a lot of them probably could be independent, or a lot of them just say, you know what, this is what we believe in, but that narrative hasn't been thrown out there yet.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to do now, Rohi, is I'd like to kind of get it, go back to the primary deal. We talked about a two-party system, and I'm going to have an opportunity, not because I'm registered as a Democrat, and I don't want us to go back and forth, but I'm going to give an opportunity in providing some of the common platforms that we see with the Democratic Party, and then you can highlight some of the platforms and or values that the Republican Party has. And these are what they're commonly described in our public sources, right? Again, you see this through media, you see this through commercials, advertisement, everything you see about a candidate, they're going to highlight these specific common interests. Their emphasis is on social programs, climate policy, labor protections, expanded healthcare access, right? I mean, you look at these things and I say, well, let me see. I want to have good healthcare, right? I want to have good labor protections. I want to have climate policy because I want to be able to breathe clean air. And I want to make sure that there's enough social programs.
Yeah.
And that's on the Democratic side, right? But nobody's talking about, well, how are you going to pay for that?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the divide happens, right? But again, they have strong support in urban centers, right? Younger voters, diverse communities, and coastal regions. Their messaging often centers around equity, inclusion, and government intervention to solve systemic problems, right? So this is kind of what the platform today, at least from what we hear today,
Sure.
is coming across to that young voter or to that voter. This is what we stand for. Some may misconstrue that and say, well, that's very left-leaning, radicals, liberals, and all these names that you'll hear out there.
Yeah.
Both media sources do this very good. They know how to portray the other opponent or the other party in a very, very evil way or a very negative way. But I'll let you go ahead and talk to me about the Republican Party and give me the common interest.
Yeah, I mean, and you see, there's usually the emphasis on limited government, which it's always the counter. I mean, to some of your points, like, we can't both be agreeing that we want more government, so you got to have that other side. So limited government, lower taxes, obviously business friendly, capitalism kind of idea, traditional social values. So you see people more. The white picket fence, I guess, home mentality of, what is it? I don't know what the nuclear family is anymore, like 2.3 kids or whatever it is, You see a lot of it in the more rural areas like ourselves here, agriculture, obviously with older voters and more religious conservatives. And, it does tend to focus on like economic freedom, and more of I don't want to say like an older style of living, but of self-sustain. Like I can do it myself. I don't need you.
Yes.
And I know you're the history buff, so you would kind of correct me on this, but I think it more goes along. Republicans' older mentality was government steps in when the two of us can't agree.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like we've tried to hash it out as two human beings, but we can't figure out how to solve this maybe property issue or cattle issue, whatever it is, and then now we need quote unquote government to help step in, maybe make a regulation, maybe stop something, make it better, but stop there. And that's kind of where it lies.
Well, even early on with our founding fathers, Rohi, this was the fight that Thomas Jefferson had with John Adams. Is like John Adams was more about a central government, that you should have more government involved in making decisions because this is how a country can continue to grow is by having the central government to make decisions. Well, back then the Democratic Party, or what you call Thomas Jefferson, was like, no, we should be more autonomous. We should have more autonomy in the way we make our decisions, right? And from there stemmed, obviously Republicans really came into play really in the early 1950s, I think. And this is where they, again, were fighting for abolition. They were abolitionists, trying to fight for freedom of slavery, or to remove slavery completely, right? And,
what?
And
I thought the Democrats came up with that idea.
that was a Republican.
Because that's how it always portrays in history. It must have been a Democratic idea.
It'd be surprisingly the Democrats were really against it. Quite frankly.
For somebody to have the first black president be Democrat,
it is crazy the way. But again, these things tend to shift, Rohi. It's funny how they flip flop, right? Like
it's not funny; it's planned.
Well, let's just say that it is, right? And you can go back to this guy named Lee Atwater during the 1960s, during Nixon and Reagan years, right? And he did a great job of taking a lot of these Southern Democrats, right? They were very conservative to a certain extent, right? And he flipped them over as Republicans because of what he portrayed, the narrative that he had out there. And I mean, you can read his book or you can go out and see the documentary that that's available. But it was interesting. These parties tend to do that. They shift. They shift because they're always looking to gain what? They're looking to gain voters, looking at members and people that are loyal, right? So again, and here's something about California. And I wanted to bring this up because it's important for us to see. But this map here, Rohi, kind of to your point, it shows that the concentration of a lot of the bluer sections are all mainly urban areas. And this is where the majority of the population resides, right? Here in the Central Valley, we can see they're somewhat pink, light blue, but the majority of these rural areas it's not like it's a lot of people. It's 4.8 million people just within 8 counties, or less than 5 million people.
Yeah.
Imagine up here how many other millions of people are there. They beat us by about 27, 30 million. So it's like almost what, I want to say 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Right? So when it comes to making policy, well, yeah, these areas that are highly urban are going to have a different need, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? When we talk about rural, we talk about that conservative, I'll do it on my own, I can grow my own food. But in these areas, people are crammed in sometimes, like sardines. So they don't really have the space that we have out here. So obviously there's 2 different types of needs. And I think the problem with us is that we can't see that. We can't see that these people that live like sardines out here want to have transit, want to have better air quality,
Yeah.
and that's their way of living, because that's all they have, their environment. They have to adapt to their environment. Whereas here in the rural areas of the Central Valley, we have a lot more freedom with space, right? And that's slowly starting to get encroached by people that are coming out, and land becomes scarce at some point.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and because you have swaths of acres here just with a lot of land. Okay, and you can grow your own stuff. Roy,
Yeah.
for crying out loud, you can have a gun. You can go out there and shoot guns out there
Yeah.
in the county, there in the countryside,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't think you can do that. I mean, you do it in the
Yeah.
urban areas, but I mean, it's you probably get arrested for it. Out here,
Yeah.
it's probably more accepted.
But that's why when you look at, you know, and not going too far off topic with your map, but when you're looking at this, you know, crazy idea about like dividing California up into, you know, however many parts, on the surface it makes sense, because you go like, there's the map. That's how you divide it up. And then it's like, no, somebody comes in and says, well, no. We're going to circle in still some of these giant blue areas. And it's like, well, why? We just said we don't agree on anything. They have their needs, we have our needs, but yet there's obviously
One
something
size
there.
fits all is what they're trying to,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the problem we see with our 2-party system, is that, you know, whether it's a Republican person in Congress or a Republican administration in our state, then, you know, do those values align with the rest of these folks here, right? And vice versa. When you have a Democratic ran administration in the state, do their values and or platforms align with our rural areas, right?
Yeah.
And this is a constant divide. And I don't know, I guess this is where I have a problem, is that, okay, wow, I mean, how do we all get along? How do we get along, Rohi? And is that just an idea that's generated out there that we may be able to get along, or is it something that we'll never get to, and we can't have that harmony to come and say, you know what, we can get along? Because there's so many other factors and so many other layers that once you bring them out to the table, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. Imagine someone coming to you, Rohi, to your area, and saying, Rohi, you have to give up some of that land, or you have to give up some of this, some of your freedoms, because you have to make sure that it's spread across not necessarily in an equal share, but you have to be more, how would I say that? What's the word? More generous, so to speak. Do you think that aligns with values of conservatives and or Republicans?
I don't. I mean, I think when you, and from just my perspective, is that when you say, can we get along? Well, you know, there is a very old, long-standing group that their underlying idea is we can have differences, but we still can do business together. It's a very secret organization, but they're very large in this country, in this world. But so can you do that? Yes, you and I both sit on opposite, so say political, tables, but we can still get along. We can still conduct business. We can still be friends. We can have a coffee, a podcast, so it can be done. I think the underlying real pull is when you look at, for instance, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, you want to make money. You want to have a business. You want to have this capitalistic idea of, I want to have a business that runs and makes money. What I don't like is when you are, let's say, the Democratic side and says, hey, you know what? We agree that you have to have fair wages. Like, Jose's only making $8 an hour, and he can't raise his family and have them go to college, and he can't drive his BMW to work because he's only making $8. And you go, well, then he just needs to get a different job. You know what I mean? Like the Republican side of me just says like, well, this job wasn't intended to make him rich. It was intended to give him a skill, and the society should teach him to keep achieving more, become a manager, go back to school, maybe whatever. But don't say, I'm not paying him enough. And then you raise his wage, and then all of a sudden now I can't make money, and what happens? We'll see you, California.
Yeah.
Goodbye. So there's some of that, but why I'm saying that is you can't be also a Democratic business owner and think the same way, because if you did, just pay your employee more.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have a business, Jose has his store and I have my store, and I pay $8, but Jose wants to pay 12. Good.
Yeah.
That's America. That's your choice.
Yeah.
But why force me to pay 12 just because you think that needs to be the standard that everybody pays? Just everybody go work for Jose, and then but I'm gonna make more money.
And I think the counter to that, Rohi, is that, I think you brought something up earlier, a very good concept. You said you wanna be left alone up until you need to settle a dispute.
Yeah.
And this is where central government would come in and say, hey, we need to settle this, or we need to fix this.
Yeah.
We had this happen early on in believe me, a lot of these examples took place early on in our very early stages of this country, right? We're celebrating 250 years for crying out loud. But early on, I'm sure a lot of struggles and trials went through this, right? We had the antitrust laws, monopolies that were taking place. And then you would say, is that really American? Is that American to be able to own everything, all the distributions and everything? Is that American? Or is it, hey, you're buying, you're lobbying the interests so that you can continue to grow, but not allow another fellow business person grow in that capacity to make it competitive and truly make it capitalistic, so that, hey, prices can be fair versus I own and I run the whole thing. And you see that with you saw that probably with energy at some point, electricity, PG&E, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But you have this to allow competitiveness, to allow for things to happen. But here's the thing, and like I said, my counter to that was, government plays a certain role not only for social programs, but it also does for businesses, very important businesses. And one may say, well, I don't depend on the government up until you start flipping the layers and flipping. Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
This is how you depend on it. I think it has a role, right? It has a role, but it's just that the way it's portrayed, or the way the narrative is generated, it can easily sway a certain way. Well, the Democrats are like this. Well, the Republicans are that. But at the end of the day, Rohi, I don't think anybody really wins, because nothing's gotten better.
Yeah.
Right? So we can easily play the blame game and say, well, I'm going to blame the Democrats, or I'm going to blame the Republicans. But truthfully, I think you brought up a good example, you and I, right? We may sit on separate sides of how this party line is, and sometimes I wonder, Rohi, if I want to be either one, right? Maybe become neutral in that I don't need to be aligned to any or be loyal to any party. But it seems like if you're not, then you really don't have a political career here, because it seems like you have to be a loyalist to one of these parties in order to get funding to get your message across. And that's the unfortunate thing. It's the grassroots efforts are still out there, but they're not as big, because you see it, you showed it to us right there with the Green Party. They're just not big enough to influence people. But you and I, we can have a sit down, we can have a coffee, we can always have agreements and disagreements. But yet, I know that, hey, you mean well for your family, you mean well for the business, and you mean well for your community, because I've had an opportunity to know who you are, right? It's not because I knew that you were a Republican or you carry a D or an R. It's because I know who you are, right? And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that I'm not trying to sing kumbaya here and say we should come together, but I think it's important to understand how this two-party system continues to survive, and sometimes we're not necessarily getting the true benefits of what we should when we stick with the two-party system.
And that's what's difficult, because again, looking at like when you the Democrats and how they want to push the I guess it's a great notion, we need to have systems in place to build everybody up. Like, we want to make everybody better. We want to have free access to school, and like you said, healthcare, and all these things. And it sounds great, and it just where I think the party line divides is it says, well, do it on your own dollar, don't do it on mine, right? Like, you believe in it, and again, most of this comes from people that we remind people. Most of these people that are higher up in the political status are usually very wealthy themselves. You know, Tom Sawyer, who's running for, Steyer is running for, not Sawyer, Steyer is running for governor. His whole ad campaign, I'm going to give half of my money away. Then give half your money away. That's your personal choice. But why is that a running thing? That's not a government aspect. You want to go build a program, you want to go help the needy, then go make a foundation and go run it and make, the Steyer Foundation, and maybe he already has something like that, and do it. But don't tell me over here in Madera, California, that you're going to tax me an extra whatever, couple $1,000s out of my check because you want to run your program. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So
yeah, I know, and I think this is where I think history, we bring some context to it, right? So prior to World War II, we had the Roaring '20s, and one can say that this was fully capitalistic in its, and so I mean, people were just making money, right? But see, that's the thing.
Underground.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I like that because this brings a prime example of what happens when there's booms and busts, right? Who pays the price at the end of the day with booms and busts? Because there's speculators. See, like the average person out there working, Roy, doesn't have all that money to go gamble in the stock market, doesn't have that money to go out there and speculate. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are just dependent on that job to be able to make a decent amount of living, and you be able to feed their family, right? Whether you crop, whether you farm, I mean, and those things are slowly starting to vanish because you're starting to see a lot of institutional investment taking place. A lot of these companies that are buying land and they're starting to invest because it's harder to be a family-owned farm when you're competing against markets around the world. It shouldn't be, right?
But it shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be, yeah. But again, those markets are made because there's global competition, right? And then there's protections for that too, because you want to protect your farmers here as well. Mm-hmm. So without getting into the weeds of that, the example that I was trying to make is that Roaring '20s, boom, bust, crash, bam, depression, right? So now people, I mean, you're doing things in austerity to try to stimulate the economy, try to stimulate this government. I mean, you were slaughtering hogs, you were burying them to try to create this demand of like, hey, how do we get the wheels turning again for this engine to start the economy again, right? And you're trying all these methods. You have the Hoover Dam, right? You have these huge, massive public work projects that are putting people back into work, right? And again, this is government coming into the picture now to see how do I get people involved. And people may not really know. People back then that were really pro-labor, well, this is how they got their opportunity, their foot on the door, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had the FHA coming in. You had, how people can secure financing. Back then, you had to come in with 20% conventional financing with 5-year loans. And if you didn't pay the lender, hey, guess what? Tough love. But there was protections added. So this new deal, so to speak, or that Franklin Roosevelt put out there was to try to get people Social Security, and I don't know if Medicare was there. I think that may have come later on. But these were programs implemented by government to try to have people. Now, we can go back and say, was that the right thing to do? Did we screw up there? Is that where we screwed up there as far as where we started running into debt? You know what got us out of that depression, Rohit, to be honest with you? It was the war. Yeah. The fact that we can start producing. All these other European countries were facing massive, their communities were destroyed by bombs and reconstruction. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? In the U.S., we didn't have that problem. Guess who was providing them all those resources and manufacturing? We became the manufacturer of the world. Mm-hmm. This is why when people talk about let's make America great again, they talk about this period soon after World War II. This period of like just manufacturing, industrial, where everyone had a job. Mm-hmm. Everyone had a job. Women were making money. People were buying homes. You could buy a home for like $8,000 a year. $8,000. Yeah. Rohi, that's your annual salary. Mm-hmm. And now? That's crazy. But that's the history that I want to give, because I think it brings it to today, how we gone beyond that, where we no longer can afford that. and we're facing some issues now. So then when we do this narrative in the political system, look what they're doing. Look what they're doing. But it doesn't solve any of the issues. It doesn't solve any of the issues. And I think that's why we're having this conversation, is to say, how does this two-party system help? And let's move on. I know we have some other stuff in there, but I'll let you answer that. I mean, I didn't want to go in there in a rant and not give you an opportunity to.
I don't know. It's a lot to unravel there. But no, I think what's important is like you said, it's and I hate to say there's probably it's something that you're saying that has been very well known, that the boom is going to come after the destruction. And in America, besides when we had like Pearl Harbor and the attacks on America, I mean, like, America has been pretty much untouched. We've never had a true rebuilding. We've never had now parts of California with like the Palisades and like the fires that happen, like we have some of that. But when we talk about like the full destruction, I mean, imagine like New York City getting leveled and saying we have to rebuild it. That's an economic boom. The only thing we've had, and this happened around the world, but it happened also here, is COVID. I mean, COVID was our latest doom and gloom of, we went to pretty much in almost a near depression, right? I mean, the early COVID, like, you saw a stock market crashing and everything was crashing, and then all of a sudden it shot up, right? So some of that, again, by design or not, we're not going off the tangent, but when you look at the elections that were happening around there, the swing of not again voting Trump back in and voting in Biden is because the promise is what he was going to do different and all these things, and people were championed like, yeah, hey, we're gonna come out of this as if like Biden had the magic spell to get us out of COVID. I mean, maybe he did. Maybe the stuff he was doing was the greatest for us. But that's when you're a voter, that's all you can be left with during these times is, I know we're here and I need something different, because that's what most ad campaigns will say is change. Obama ran on change. Like these things of like focusing in on that voters are pretty much always unhappy, and I'm going to make them happy. So therefore, you're going to vote for me. And I think it's very successful to the most part, because again, anybody who sits down and really analyzes their life today, I'm sure they wish they could be better.
Yeah.
Like, even if you're really great, and if you got all the money in the world, you always probably think, I could be better. So going off of like this change mentality is very strong, because again, it doesn't matter what party you're in, you feel like that guy or that girl is going to somehow, by my vote and them being voted in, is going to make my life better. But then, you hear a lot of times that the majority of times politicians never follow through on any of the things they say anyway. So it goes back to, well, why vote anyways?
Yes.
I'm voting for this guy or this girl because I think they're going to execute this plan they're talking about, and they get in and you find out, well, it was a great idea, but they take so much more to getting that plan executed. And I think that's what, going back to your voter fatigue, it's like, then why vote anyways?
Yeah. No. And again, I guess I like you said, am I a history buff? I just like history.
I know you do.
Because it really, for me, it's helpful to help me interpret what I see today, right? Because it's hard for me to imagine the average voter out there that probably doesn't have the context of what's taken place over these last 250 years, right? I mean, not everybody. I don't think that I'm completely aware of every single political decision that took place or policy that has shaped where we're at today. But understanding some of that historical background helps me kind of see, right? I like to see what's taking place and what's shaping. And a lot of the narratives that we see today, whether it's on the Republican side or Democratic side, a lot of the times they're just merely attacks to try to get the voter to side with you and touch their emotions, because that's how voters typically vote, is by emotions, right? And I'm not saying all voters, but come on, Rohi, let's be honest. A lot of people are out working. A lot of people, I mean, you get this ballot pamphlet like this thick. I mean, I'd be the first to tell you. I look at it, yes, but I'm not going to tell you that I read it all. And if I did, I'd lie to you. But it's a lot to process. while I have to process how I'm going to put food on the table, how I have to get my car fixed, how I got to,
Yeah.
you know, the last thing I need is you. So it's easier for you to just give me a narrative on TV or a message on social media. Oh yeah, by the way, that's the 49ers. I'm a 49er diehard, and I'm going to go screw the Raiders,
Yeah.
or I'm a Raider fan. And that's typically what we're seeing here. We're seeing almost a Coliseum style type of battle between these two parties that are saying, well, I'm going to go this way because I've been a diehard Republican all my life. And I'm going to go this way because, but truthfully, do you really know the context of why we're here, right? Why is it that we're here? And what's happening? Do you see your life getting better? Do you see things getting better for us here? And I'm not saying this is a doom and gloom. I'm just saying, you know, when you really put it down in a micro, a magnifying glass, Roy, you'd be surprised how much alike you and I are, but yet how these parties make us seem like we're very, very, very different, and we're not. And that, I think that's not the message that I want to leave you with today, but I want to make sure that I emphasize that, because a lot of us just want to have a better life, you know?
Yeah.
And how we do that and who we have to align with to do it, that's the key message that you see out there.
Yeah, and I you know, I talked to a few of the people about, you know, with voting and stuff, and you know, asking some of them, like, you know, did you vote? And some were like, well, no. And it catches you off guard. But then, you know, one of them, I talked to him and I said, well, why didn't you vote? And he said, I just didn't know who to vote for. You know, so I think there's some of that too, where people are just going, like you said, they're looking at it and going like, if I don't really have a strong party affiliation, like, I don't know who the heck to vote for. I don't know any of these people. I see a name. I think their name looks, you know, whatever, or maybe I just happen to, you know, my subconscious remember seeing a sign on the freeway, so that name just kind of pops in my head. But there's a lot of voters that I think that are just, I don't want to say out of touch, but they're just not fully aware, and so they just feel like, well, it's too powerful. Like, my vote, I don't want to vote not knowing who I'm voting for,
Yeah.
so they just like, no, I'm gonna leave it aside. And then the other one was, you know, somebody who was working on their citizenship, and to me that conversation was interesting because I thought, okay, here's somebody so excited to become an American, like they're going through with this process, and we start talking about voting, and they're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to vote, and you're like, why? Like, this is the core of why you would want to be an American. I mean, like, you have pretty much all your other rights as a permanent resident. The voting is kind of like the last piece of the puzzle, and you're like, nah, I'm good. And it's just crazy to think that, like,
It's
wow,
easier
you know?
for someone to say, I'm all right, I'm not going to vote, than put them through that stressful situation of having them fight within themselves of who they need to choose, right? And you're not alone there, Rohi. I too ran into someone that a little older, maybe in their 40s now, and mentioned, I haven't voted since I was 18, right? And when you look at that, you say, well, I mean, is that a systemic flaw? Is that someone, or is that an individual flaw, not wanting to participate in making decisions and putting people that are going to represent you, right? Is that a flaw of their own, or is that a systemic flaw? And you wonder and say, well, maybe it's an educational deal where, you know, maybe it is mandatory for you to vote, right? It's for you to have your voice, because then you can't complain. But for them, it's like, I'd rather not get involved because no matter what, I'm still getting screwed, right? So for a lot of these people, that's the way they look at it. Whereas your loyal voters, your constant, every single high propensity voters, they'll always turn out no matter what. It's a primary, midterm, or even a general election. They'll always be there. And I think it's important for us to emphasize that is that, you know, it does make a difference. And I can tell you from personal experience that one vote matters. I mean, I don't want to go back to that because it hurts. It hurts to tell people that I lost by one vote.
Yeah.
You know, and it does. I mean, but again, you know, lesson learned is that, you know, people, if you really care about the people that represent you in your communities, then you should vote. Rohi, we're going into 30, almost 40 minutes, and I know that this is a pretty good topic. Let's kind of come down the talking points and see if there's anything else, and then we'll finish up with the last thoughts, and we'll wrap this show up. But if you have any comments, feel free to comment, give us some likes, subscribe, and share, because I think for us, I mean, we're two local council members that just want to bring out topics that I think sometimes are uncomfortable, but at the same time, you know, we're doing it in a very respectful way.
Yeah.
You know, and this is again, registered Democrat, registered Republican coming together, having a podcast show. Come on, Roy. I mean, where do you see that? Maybe we should create our own party, right?
No, I mean, I think what's most important, and I was told that a long time ago, is understanding when you truly say, how is this person going to affect my life personally? I think it's like you said, it's important to understand your local politics, who you're voting for, you know, what they believe in, what maybe their track record, because they're going to have a much more direct, you know, change on your life here. On the grander scale, you know, yeah, you know, we can demonize the governor and, you know, some of the politics at the higher levels, but, you know, sometimes it's still kind of out of touch, like you said, because they're trying to appeal to a much broader audience. And just, you know, and remembering that again, you know, what is important to Madera, you know, what's going to keep Madera thriving or even going better, you know, because there's things that are going to be very specific to our town that, you know, you're voting for the person in Fresno, it doesn't, they're totally different, you know, economic system, they have different issues, and realizing that's why when you say, you know, the city council being nonpartisan is very important, because they're not Democrat or Republican problems, they're city problems. This is what we have to come to make Madera better. So I think if you're voting for a candidate you truly believe wants to make Madera better, and not have personal interest or personal gain that they're trying to accomplish. So,
And just so that you know, that wasn't a campaign slogan.
That was not,
for my
but
colleague
I-
here. But in case you don't know, my colleague's up for election in this upcoming general election. And
I have no notes here. I'm just speaking.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, and he is, like I said, a very well thought out individual that has a lot of good qualities to help our city move forward. And
Thank
I
you.
certainly would endorse him 100%.
Thank you.
So if you're out there listening to the show, if it comes to the November election, make sure you vote for Rohi Sakaraya.
Yeah.
But that being said, Rohi, I guess we'll finish up by saying that we don't always have to agree on everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to agree. We just have to understand the system and that we're living in, and how we can build a better place for us here in the Central Valley. Like
Yeah.
you said, doesn't matter if you're Republican, doesn't matter if you're Democrat. I think at some point, if our county wants to embrace the demographics that change, we have, in order to move forward, we have to, or else we're going to be resistant
Yeah.
and continue to fight something that essentially it's a divide, and it's not necessarily good for the Central Valley, the county, but I mean, it is a makeup of who we are. And essentially what will happen is if this becomes the affordable place for a lot of people, well, yeah, you're going to have a lot of people from these urban areas that nobody wants to see because they infiltrate and they start eroding those values that people talk about all the time, right? Well, these values. And there was a time where I hear, oh, I knew such and such family. And nowadays, when you have 60-some thousand people, you can't keep track of all families, right? It's the growth that's happened over the last 2-3 decades.
Yeah.
And with that, do we embrace it or do we fight it, right? And I think you're going to see a mixture of political divides. But at the end of the day, we want to make our communities better.
Yeah.
And that's why we have this show. With that, we're going to go ahead and sign off, and we're going to say thank you for watching.